Good evening, my friends, and welcome to another conversation where Mark gets to talk to somebody he's known for years, and you get to listen in. I'm Mark Evanier. I've been doing these for fun mostly, but some people seem to like them. I don't know how much longer I'm going to do them, but I've got a lot of friends. So if I keep doing them, meet a lot of interesting people here. The lady with us tonight has been a friend of mine since, I think, 1980. I worked on a TV show called Pink Lady and Jeff, which we'll be talking about. And we hired her as one of the comedy players on the show. We auditioned half of Hollywood, and we'll talk about that even too. And she was so wonderful. We had to hire her. And sometimes when you go through really rough circumstances, you bond with people and they become friends for life. I think if that show had been more successful, we might not have been as good friends somehow. Anyway, I'd like to introduce you to my friend, Cheri Steinkellner.
Hello.
Hi, Cheri. Hello.
God bless that failure.
Well, it was fun when it happened. I made some tremendous friends on that show. I got to work with Sid Caesar and Jerry Lewis and some good people. I got to write songs. Oh, we had Red Buttons on the show. We had Larry Hagman. We had Donny Osmond. We had a lot of Hugh Hefner. We had a lot of Alice Cooper. That's right. We had a lot of problems getting guest stars on that show. I don't know if you knew all the things that were going on. Well, there were about 20 different things that went wrong with that show, and any 5 of them could be lethal. We just had a multiplicity of things working against us, and one of them was that nobody wanted to be on the show. Even before anybody knew who our stars were or what they were capable of or what the show was like, we were begging guest stars. And for a long time, what was happening, and a long time, I'm saying maybe 3 or 4 weeks, because we didn't have a lot of lead time either. We had to kind of just suddenly start doing the show like crazy all of a sudden. It'd be like this. They'd come to me and they'd say, I was the head writer. They'd come to me and they'd say, we have a chance to get Buddy Ebsen on the show, but he wants to see the material. So write a sketch for Buddy Ebsen. So the writers would get together. We'd write a sketch for Buddy Ebsen. And before we'd send it over, they'd come in and say, Buddy's not available. I'd say, well, we've got a sketch from him. They said, well, can you switch it to Dionne Warwick? And that is an actual example. I'm not making that one up.
Oh, those are real names.
Those are real people who were almost on the show at various times. And actually, we repurposed the Buddy Ebsen sketch. We actually repurposed that one. The rest of the sketches, we must have written 30, 40 sketches that never got read by their intended guest stars.
Who went into the Uncle Jed slot?
What? Jim Varney ended up playing Abraham Lincoln. Remember, we did the Abraham Lincoln sketch.
I do remember that.
Which you were in. And what happened was, one of the strange things about doing that show, and this is supposed to be about talking about you, not me telling you about the show. So we'll get
this is our shared life. Is
that we were working at such a frantic pace and so on such a limited budget that our art director, who was named Jeremy Railton, would come to me while we're doing show 1 and say, what sets do we build for show 3? And I'd say, I have no idea. We haven't written anything. We have no guest stars. Can't we wait? He said, no, you can't wait, because we need to build the sets, start building the sets now and bid them out. They design the sets and they send the plans to different places that built them. And they'd say, we need to build the sets. So we would just arbitrarily say, okay, build a malt shop and a movie studio or something. We just made, and then we would, when we got the guest stars, we'd figure out how to put them into the sets. So I had suggested that they build a roast set, like the Dean Martin roasts. And one of the reasons for that was, you may remember, we had a director named Art Fisher.
I remember very well.
Who didn't like me. He didn't like you. Didn't like anybody.
I have PTSD.
Oh yeah. And the one time I made Art Fisher laugh, and I remember it because it was the only time, believe me, it was a meeting where I made a joke about the crummy editing on the Dean Martin roasts. And Art Fisher laughed because he had a hate on for Greg Garrison, a fellow director. And I thought, oh, well, maybe we can win Art over. We'll do a parody of the Dean Martin. We'll do a roast. So I had them build a roast set. So then when we had Buddy Ebsen was going to be our guest star on that episode, we said, how about we'll do a roast of Abraham Lincoln? Buddy Ebsen would make a very good Abraham Lincoln. And we wrote this sketch. And then all of a sudden they said, well, we can't get Buddy Ebsen. We think we're getting Dionne Warwick. And there was no place in the sketch.
There's a place in the sketch.
Well, if a sketch about Abraham Lincoln is not the place to put a black woman, a strong. I mean, just it's, and she was also not a comedy star anyway. She was there. She would have sung. She would have been a musical guest instead.
Yeah, so, you would have written new lyrics to Bacharach, and she would have made it sing.
And whatever. Anyway, and then she fell out, and they came to me and they said, "We've got red buttons." And I thought, we've got a roast set built. We've got a roast sketch written. We've got red buttons. That was one of the times we got lucky. So red buttons played Lee. I was going to say Lee Harvey Oswald. He's the other great assassin, John Wilkes Booth. And I actually have a still here from this. You're playing Mrs. Lincoln in this sketch. And there's Jeff,
I am indeed,
who is channeling Georgie Jessel as the roast master, and Jim Varney, who people will remember for, his Hey Vern commercials. He became a very big star after this. He was playing Abraham Lincoln, and he was a very good Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, that was great.
As it turned out. Yeah. So you remember the sketch at all? You got up and started roasting Abe, and you said, if I were to summarize our love life, I would have to say, foreplay was 7 years ago.
Yes.
That was
I was kind of doing a Phyllis Diller kind of a take on Mary Todd Lincoln.
That's right, yeah. And then they brought up John Wilkes Booth, and he roasted Abe and said he did his didn't get a dinner bit, which we wrote. We must have written 80 of those things. Those little so-and-so didn't get a dinner, because Red was fussy. He was really fussy about them, and he rejected this one. And we finally got enough that he liked, and he took them all home and used them in his act later. But he was. I remember him saying, and then when Varney got up to do the rebuttal, the final thing where the roastee speaks, he said, John Wilkes Booth, you slay me. Your next performance, I hope you break a leg. Anyway, and the thing was that Art Fisher was having the time of his life imitating the bad cuts, the weird insert shots. He was purposely making the audience shot, the dais shots look like they were cut in later, even though they weren't. And he had a great time. It was the only sketch we did he liked, I think. And the other strange thing about that sketch, and I'll shut up about this and talk to you in a minute, was that one of the battles that I fought as head writer when we were hiring the writing staff, and later once we had one, was the era where everybody who was a comedy writer wanted to be in the show as an actor, because they all wanted to be Chevy Chase or Steve Martin or someone else who'd gone from the writing staff to making zillions of dollars in movies.
We're in the first decade of SNL. It's the beginning of Fridays, and I don't know if Mad TV had come around yet, but that was the
Fridays was not on yet. I don't think Mad TV was way in the future, but variety shows at that point, the recent models were like Sonny and Cher, where some of the writers became Bob Einstein from the Smothers Brothers, and Saturday Night Live and such. And when we were auditioning writers, everyone who came in wanted to be on the show. They all wrote in characters they did. And Bonnie Dorr, who was the producer I worked with, we decided not to put any writers in the sketch. We were going to hire a bunch of comedy players. You were one, Anna Mathias was another, Jim Varney was another, to fill out the sketches, because we knew that me and Kay, our Pink Lady girls, were of no use for comedy sketches at all. So Jeff had to have somebody to talk to.
Well, only in that they only spoke English phonetically.
Well, yes. So the writers we had all wanted to be in the sketches anyway. They kept saying to me, Mark, can't we be in the sketches? I go, no, we're not putting any writers in sketches. So finally on that episode, I think that was show 5, maybe, show, whatever it was, on that episode, we needed men to fill it. We had an all-male writing staff because we literally could not find any women writers who didn't want to be in sketches. And all the writers came to me and they said, you must put us in the, please let us be the guys on this. We want to be in the show. So I said, okay, you guys can be in the show on the condition that on tape day, you don't go down there and get into makeup and hair and everything until the call time for the sketch. Because we have to write that day. We've got to write the next show.
Right.
And I don't want to lose the day. And they all pledged to, and then that day they all got into makeup at 10 a.m. and spent all day on the set getting ready to act. Except, okay, so then I get this call around, I think we were supposed to do the sketch at 4 o'clock, and we were so far behind, we got to about 8 o'clock. But I get this call about 3:30 saying, Mark, your call time has been moved. And I said, I don't have a call time. And they said, yes, you're in the sketch. I said, no, I'm not in the sketch. The other writers are in the sketch. They said, no, we were told the writers were going to do it, so we got you a costume. So
do we have that picture?
I don't have that picture, no. So now what happens? Okay, now what happens is that I've said, well, I don't really want to. They said, Mark, we've got this all planned out. We don't have any other extras. You have to be in the sketch. I said, okay, I'll be in the sketch. And I made a point of not going down to the set. I would go down to the set to check on the show and see how things were going and such in my capacity as head writer. But I wouldn't go down to hang out with the writers who were all in these Civil War era costumes for the sketch. And they're saying, why aren't you in the costume? I said, because we got another 2.5 hours. We're getting to the sketch. I don't have to. So I went down at the last minute. I put on the costume, feeling so stupid. I do not like doing that. I do not like being on camera. I couldn't have done this years ago. This as limited as the audience is for this webcast, I couldn't have done this years ago. And I still would never do anything where I had to play a character. I don't do that. I can't do that. I'm just awful. So I get to my costume. They place me. We did this thing in like 1 take or 2 takes. I think it was very, very fast because the camera work was so simple on it, and because me and Kay weren't in it. And so we did the sketch very fast. And I'm sitting there on the set. And you know how there's that moment a lot of actors have, and they say, the first time I was on a stage, I knew that's where I belonged. I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, this is not where I belong. I belong in the booth watching this on the monitor and suggesting things. I felt so wrong. I
followed pretty close after you.
Oh, well, anyway, so then I was literally thinking to myself, I thought, boy, this is the one, there's only one thing I do worse than acting, to the extent that I was even acting, and that's dancing. I am the worst dancer in the world. I am so terrible. And then I realized the sketch ended with dancing, all the extras jumping up and dancing. I just realized that. I wrote the song that they were dancing to. You and Anna came out and sang the finale song, and then all of us were supposed to leap up and start dancing.
And you're just knocking this in real time.
I am just literally, and we are taping, we're rolling tape, and I am thinking, uh-oh, I can't get out of here. I'm stuck. So I got up and I danced a little, and I think that's why we got canceled. That was me.
It's not you. It was an initiatory moment, and you are better because of it.
Okay. Now let's talk about you for a minute. Where were you professionally before I met you? The day before you got hired for Pink Lady, we saw you. Roby Gorin, one of our writers, saw you at the Comedy Store Players. You were in an improv group there. Tell us about the Comedy Store Players and what you'd done before to get into that group.
How far back should we go? Let's just go back to the Comedy Store Players.
Yeah.
I got into the Comedy Store Players. I don't exactly know how. I was a pretty natural improviser. I didn't know how desperately wrong things in improv could go because I didn't have a lot of background in it. I had just begun at the Groundlings, and I hadn't put in enough time to get nervous and scared and clutch up. So when I went to the audition for the Comedy Store Players, I was, I was one of those fools who rush in where angels fear to tread, and they cast me, and I formed kind of a comedic partnership with the late beloved Taylor Negron, and we started doing sketches that were based on a couple of high school girls. This is pre-Valley Girl, pre all that stuff. We just observed these girls. I was a tour guide at Universal Studios too. And so one day I observed
That's the first time. That was the first time I wrote for you.
At Universal Studios, yes, you did.
I wrote one of the scripts for that, yes.
Yes. You see that path going up to the Psycho House. Yes. We call it the
Psychopath. Yes, that's it. Right.
Yeah.
If I got royalties on that joke, I'd have the house next door to you now. Anyway.
If you only got royalties from me saying that joke. And by the way, I think it's really funny. Look, I'm wearing my Edith Head orange, just the same color as our tour guide uniforms were.
Oh, there you are. That's right. Who was when you were a tour guide? Who was the celebrity they got to meet at the end of the tour? There was always a celebrity. I
think I came in after the era of the celebrity.
Oh, okay. So it was Bob.
Occasionally you'd see, occasionally you'd be on the tram, and I would say something like, if you look on the driver's side of the tram, because there's no such thing as right and left. There's only the driver's side of the tram and my side of the tram. And I still say that. My children still understand that is the equivalent of right and left. But sometimes it would be, if you look on the driver's side of the tram, you'll see Lee Majors, the $6 million man. But we didn't have a meet a celebrity moment.
Because I used to have, when I was writing the script, it was Bob Hastings from McHale's Navy. They paid him to meet and greet the fans at the end of the tour and sign autographs and tell stories. And then I think later it was Al Lewis from the Munsters and various
Grandpa
people
Munster.
Like Grandpa Munster, yes. And all right,
yeah,
so now you're in the
have that.
Yeah. Okay.
So I segued into this felt like a crazy mixed up Ungapach story, but I was in the Comedy Store Players. I was basically Taylor and I were doing our bit, and it was super popular. And the other reason the Comedy Store Players was very well attended back on those Mondays was because a fellow named Robin Williams had just burst onto the scene as Mork from Ork, and in his rainbow suspenders and all his buttons, and he literally could not get enough performance time in. So he'd come over from Paramount Studios from the set, and he'd come in and he'd work out, is what we called it, with the Comedy Store Players. And I basically functioned, when I wasn't in my own pieces, as a prop for Robin Williams. And I never knew exactly what he was gesturing upstage of me. I was 21, 22 years old, but he was gesturing something that had the audience in stitches. And I couldn't turn around and look. I just had to kind of go along with it. And I'm sure, if it was this day and age, those particular gestures would not have occurred, or I would have Me Too'd in a big way. But yeah, that was the Comedy Store Players. That's where Roby saw me, I guess.
Yeah, Roby, we were looking for. We had all these fights about who was going to be the backup players. Art Fisher was threatening to quit if we didn't hire Judy Landers. And I would say, our stars are two petite brunettes. Do you want to put a tall blonde with a big chest next to them? It's not quite right. And also, Judy Landers couldn't sing, or we didn't sing, and she didn't sing as well as Audrey, who's the one I said, if you're going to have a Landers sister, let's get Audrey. I know Audrey. She sings well. Anyway, but Roby said there was this really talented girl with curly hair. He didn't know your name. So I
didn't have a name. I was Robin Williams' prop.
That's right. Yes. So somebody at the Crofts called the Comedy Store and said, "Who's the girl with the curly hair?"
I did
And
not know this.
that is and they brought you in, and Roby went, "Yeah, that's her," and that's how you got into that audition.
Wow, I never knew this story until all these decades later.
Yeah, if there had been two women with curly hair in the troupe at that time, you might never have gotten picked. They might have
Thank
brought
you,
the
Robbie
wrong one in.
Goran.
Yes. Anyway, so you came in and we did auditions, and we auditioned lots of people, lots of folks who went on to much better jobs than being on that show, including Audrey and Judy. And I remember we had George Miller came in, and Alton was trying to get. No, it was earlier when he was talking about getting Letterman in on something. Anyway, but he knew, Jeff was a guy who knew all the comedians in town.
Yeah,
and he was wonderful. He was so one of the many joys of that show was working with Jeff. He was so funny. He was so good. I just was amazed by how clever he was, how fast he got everything, and because he had, the thing that struck me was that Jeff had all the equipment. I mean, there's some guys who can just stand on a stage and be funny, tell funny stories. Jeff could stand on, tell funny stories. He could do dialects. He could do funny characters. He could do impressions, and he did great physical comedy. He was one of the few guys doing stand-up at that time who could move funny, who could get up on stage and use his body and contort it. He could turn himself into a wrestler. He could turn himself into a little guy. He had this rubbery body, and he was amazing.
He was super nimble, but he was also really affable. Like, you just couldn't not like Jeff.
Yeah.
And I mean, I always thought, oh, he's gonna take over the Late Show. He's so funny and clever and quick and present.
Yeah. Well, he could just about anything. He could, but the only thing he couldn't do was sing. And so we kind of thought, like, well, me and Kay can sing, and they can't really do anything else. So between them, we've got like one variety star. We've got them who can sing, and Jeff who can do everything else.
Right.
But the problem, of course, was that those girls, it wasn't just that they couldn't speak English, but they couldn't be there for very long because they were such superstars in Japan. We could only get them. You probably have the same memory I have of them falling asleep in the rehearsal hall because they were so jet lagged for the whole time. And I would keep writing them out of sketches. We put them in a sketch, and I'd take them out just to give them time to go take a nap or something like that.
Do you remember the time when their entire entourage, which they had a male posse, all showed on a Monday? On the weekend when they left, they had just their regular hair. And when they came back, they had my hair. all the men went and got permanent.
Yeah, well, we have I have a few more pictures from the show. That's them. There's Jeff. That was me on the left, M-I-E, not me, and K-E-I on the right. And those two girls did not want to be there. They did not want to do this show. They wanted to be back in Japan with their boyfriends, and they were pretty miserable the whole time that we were doing that show, and I felt so bad for them.
You knew a lot more than I did. I was in my own, kind of in my own comedy backup player bubble.
Yeah, well, I was fighting with Art Fisher all the time, and we were fighting with the schedule and problem with guests. We couldn't get guests, and they would literally come to us and say, "You've got to put the listing in TV Guide tomorrow. TV Guide's listing closes tomorrow. Who's the guest stars?" We had nobody, and Marty would jump on the phone and start begging people, and that's how we got Hugh Hefner and a bunch of Playmates.
I remember that.
We were absolutely. What? Pardon? What was?
Hot Tub Time.
Yes, Hot Tub Time. Yeah, we literally had no guest stars at all, nobody, and we had to tell TV Guide in 8 hours who was going to be on the show, and we were sitting down. I'm thinking, who can Marty get quickly? And I mentioned Jerry Lewis because Marty was good friends with Jerry Lewis. He calls Jerry, and Jerry was busy. He couldn't come in. He said, "I'll come for the next show." Or was he on the next? Yeah, I guess he was on the next show. And then I mentioned Hefner because Hefner had done the Sonny and Cher show, and he'd done Saturday Night Live, and we thought we could have some fun with him. And Marty literally just in front of me picks up the phone, calls Hefner, gets him on the phone, and he says, "Bring along a bunch of playmates." And he said, "Okay." And we called TV Guide and said, "Hugh Hefner and a bunch of playmates," and that's why they were on the show. We were begging people. You should have seen the list of people who were going to do the show and didn't.
Wow.
And yeah, and that was the biggest problem of my life, was just trying to write stuff at the last minute for whoever we got at the last minute,
and not knowing who's going to show up.
Well, at one point, and I don't want this to be about my side of the show, but Fred Silverman calls up and he says, we're taping. We're in the middle of the taping. And he says, I got you another guest star. Lauren Green's on his way over. And we went, what? Yeah, Lauren Green will be there in an hour to tape a bit for the show. Write him something. And the problem, of course, is that me and Kay couldn't learn anything in an hour.
Right.
We would write stuff for them, and then we couldn't change it. We couldn't rewrite it. Once they'd learned it, it was locked in there. So
yeah, it was a bit of an escape room trick.
Yeah,
trying to figure out all that stuff.
Yeah. Anyway, here's some other sketches you were. And this is from there you are playing Bette Midler, I believe.
Yes.
Who you were playing in that thing. There's Jeff as Jimmy Carter. He did a great Jimmy Carter impression.
Yeah.
And,
you let me play. I got to play Amy Carter. I remember that too.
Yeah. Yes. And there you are playing like a Marilyn Monroe type, and I believe Jeff is doing Howard Cosell there, or someone with a bad toupee, but tell the story about what happened with Jerry Lewis and you. Remember the thing?
I think I'll tell you what's a better story is the Sid Caesar Swan Lake story.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Or at least it's one that I have a clearer trauma from.
All right, go ahead.
So Sid Caesar was, as you recall, but for those who may not know, he was the star of stars from your show of shows. He was everything, right? Wasn't Sid Caesar the comedian's comedian?
Well, he was the most respected comedian of his era, and that show was the most respected comedy variety show of its time. And Sid
launched Neil Simon and
Mel Brooks and Sid Caesar and Carl Reiner and Howie Morris and Imogene Coca, and the writing staff. Later on, he had Larry Gelbart, he had Sheldon Keller, the guy who was their secretary typist, Michael Webster, wrote Hello Dolly and Bye Bye Birdie. I mean, it was a pretty good. And the guys who wrote Fiddler on the Roof worked on that show for a while. And
so Sid Caesar is royalty of royalty, correct?
Correct.
And I am, Robin Williams prop. I'm like barely in my 20s and utterly intimidated. And we are doing a sketch because one of Sid Caesar's famous things that he did was gibberish in other languages.
Yeah.
And this was around the time when, was it Mikhail Baryshnikov came to the U.S. and left the Russian ballet?
Yes.
Am I remembering this correctly?
No, you're right. You're right.
You all wrote a sketch that was a parody of that, where Sid Caesar was planning a defection in the middle of Swan Lake.
That's right.
And I was hired as the prima ballerina who's playing the swan.
Yeah.
And it's a heavily rehearsed piece because there's dancers everywhere. It's ballet. And I'm not up to the task in any way except the costume fit. And yet Sid Caesar, I'm playing opposite Sid Caesar in this the biggest role that I'd ever had or that you'd ever given me. Or both of those things are true. And so, and I keep, every time we have a rehearsal, the aforementioned Art Fisher is really on my case to hit my marks. and to say my lines. And I'm kind of getting a little mind-effed because I'm pretty sure I am hitting my marks. And I'm pretty sure I am saying my lines. And I go home at lunchtime and I'm just so frazzled because he keeps really hollering on me to get this right. And so I study my lines and I memorize the marks, and we come back after lunch, and I'm crying, by the way, the whole time. I come back after lunch and he is still hollering at me. And I don't know what to do because I am hitting my marks. And the aforementioned Bonnie Dorr, when we take a break, takes me aside and says, "You know why he's doing that, don't you?" And I said, "No, I don't understand anything about this." And he said, "He's doing that because he can't tell Sid Caesar to learn his lines and hit his marks. So this is his way of communicating that through you." And it was a huge lesson.
Well, you also did one thing wrong, and I guess I can tell you this after all these years, that made Art Fisher not like you. He didn't like me. He didn't like Anna. He didn't like Jeff. He didn't like Jim Varney.
I mean, good
but
company.
there was one thing you did wrong, and it was a terrible sin in his eyes, and very unprofessional from his viewpoint. You weren't Judy Landers. He was really upset that we didn't have Judy Landers on that show, and he was still angry that I had kind of helped veto her and said, let's get comedy players and people who can do different characters and things like that. And he didn't. He wanted Ms. Landers. And
I was never going to do that.
Well,
that.
you know, you if you wanted the job enough, you would have somehow
figured out a way
to become Judy Landers. Judy did fine without that. Judy did great. But you know, no, we didn't get along with that. And everybody on the staff was fighting with everybody else on that stuff. It was not that pleasant. I had to fire one of the writers on stage one day. You may remember that.
Ooh,
and
I don't. Like I told you, I was in my bubble trying to memorize lines and get them right.
We were trying to kind of make it look like a happy family and things like that. But you know, when you did that sketch, if you remember, we had a lot of problems with our choreographer. And one of the problems was that when we said we want you to stage Swan Lake, he said, "I don't never seen Swan Lake. I don't know anything about it."
Ouch.
A choreographer.
Who was it?
Joe Cassini, his name was.
Oh,
so,
okay. So he was, you know, like primo variety show choreo, right?
I didn't get along with Joe either.
I'm not defending him. I'm just saying he had a background. Resume.
He had a resume. But so you know who choreographed the Swan Lake number for that? Bridget.
Who?
My friend Bridget, one of the dancers.
Oh.
Bridget knew it because her mother was a choreographer and she had actually danced Swan Lake in the past. So
there are some classic moves, and I think we hit them.
Yeah. So no, but at that point, Cheri, were you at that point in your career? Tell people what you were doing the day we hired you. Remember,
what was I doing, Mark?
You were at The Price is Right.
Oh, was I just trying to win a refrigerator and a refrigerator freezer?
Yes, that's right.
Or a case of jerky onions?
The story, the way I remember it, is that at that point you were living with Billy, and you folks had, as many people in show business do, a deficit of cash at the moment, and you went to Price is Right that day, trying to get on, and you didn't get on the show, and you came home, and there was your agent had left messages saying you got the job. They're hiring you for this Croft Sense show. And Billy, and the way the story was, I remember the story. Maybe I'm embellishing it. Billy came in, and the first thing he said to you was, "Did you win anything?" And you said, "I got a job on a TV series." And he said, "You're giving those away on The Price is Right now?"
I know. Come on down.
That's right. And we paid you about the price of a refrigerator, I think, probably for 6 weeks.
You paid me. You changed my life. After Pink Lady and Jeff, I was able to purchase a T-bill, which at the time I think the interest rates were about 17 or 18%. So that was good.
I bought this house. So
from Pink Lady?
Yeah, from Pink Lady. Yeah.
Outstanding.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, that's the down payment. I mean, but yeah, I moved into this house while we were doing Pink Lady, I think. Right afterwards. No, before, I think. Anyway, it was roughly simultaneous. I've been working for the Cross for a while then. I doing other stuff for them, but we had a lot of fun. I got to write music and join AFTRA. I wrote a bunch of the songs for the show, and I got to work with people like you and the other. I met Jim Brochu, who I'm going to have on the show one of these days. I met so many people I'm still friends with. It's amazing, and I'm going to get Jeff on here one of these days too.
That'll be great. I'll be watching.
He's so damn funny. He really is an amazing guy.
Billy and I will never forget. We were standing with him in Beverly Hills, and he just took $1 out of his pocket and put it on the sidewalk and did an entire running commentary as people would walk by about what their inner thoughts were. Do I pick it up? Do I leave it there? And it was, oh my God, we've never forgotten it.
Jeff and I were backstage at the Comedy Store one night in the big room. He was going on the big room. And there was a comedian on stage who Jeff didn't like. And Jeff had very strong taste in comedy. He was polite to everybody generally and very gentlemanly and professional. But he let you know that he thought that guy was terrific and that guy was a thief and stuff like that. And the guy who was on stage, who shall remain nameless, it was Yakov Smirnoff, was doing his little What a Country routine. And Jeff just thought the guy was undeserving of the whatever laughter he was getting. And it wasn't that much laughter. So Jeff turns to me, he says, you got a watch on? I did. He says, you got a timer on that watch? I said, yes. He said, I'm going to go out there. He was up next. And I want you to time me. I want you to tell me when 5 minutes is up. In 5 minutes, I'm going to get more laughs than him without saying a single word. You watch this. So they introduced Jeff. He went out and he started doing funny walks that put John Cleese to shame, and funny body movements. And he would just make funny faces and distort his body. And he just was glaring at the audience and making faces. He was hysterical. It was 5 of the funniest minutes you ever saw in your life. And finally, at the end of the 5 minutes, I went, time. And he just suddenly turned to Jeff Altman. He said, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jeff Altman from Syracuse, New York. And the place exploded.
He was highly motivated. He had something to prove.
Well, the thing was that a lot of guys there could be funny if you gave them lines. I gave a lot of guys lines. There were a lot of guys who really were not funny unless they had actual material. Jeff went out and did 5 hysterical minutes without a single scrap, without a joke, without a concept, without saying a word. He just was funny.
I remember it well.
He did pratfalls. He did physical stuff. Anyway, just amazing. So at the moment you got hired, before you got hired for this, where did you think your career was going to go? Was it going to be performing or writing, or where were you hoping to go next?
I thought I was going to be a performer. I didn't get over that thing. I didn't have my Lincoln's roast moment until about 4 or 5 years later, when I realized, I've been doing the wrong thing all this time. As Joseph Campbell says, I climbed up the ladder and realized it was against the wrong wall. I thought I was going to be an actor, and you helped convince me that I could. I was doing commercials mostly, and I was doing dinner theater. They discovered that I was Jewish and funny and could sing at least well enough to be the Orange County dinner theater version of Funny Girl.
I saw you in Downey doing Funny Girl.
Oh, wow.
Do you remember the gift I sent you opening night?
Tell me what you sent me. Remind me.
I sent you flowers.
Oh, God, I love you.
That said, you are the greatest star. And then I went backstage afterwards. I went up to you and you hugged me, and I said to you, Aren't you lonely without another actor on that stage? Because you were carrying the whole show. Anybody who plays Fanny Brice is going to carry the whole show. I mean,
well,
no matter who it is.
Yeah, the only time anybody else ever gets to have a scene or sing a song is when I'm backstage changing costumes.
Yeah,
for my next big song.
You'd almost get the idea that that show was configured originally for an actress with a very powerful ego. So
my grandparents one time snuck into one of my many performances as Fanny Brice with their cassette recorder, which I think was like about this big, their GE cassette recorder. And they recorded it so that every morning at breakfast, they could listen to me playing the role of Barbra Streisand, as they put it. She plays the role of Barbra Streisand, and they quelled, and they cried, and they listened to me singing Private Schwartz and Rockaway and all of that. And it was for them. I was living my mother's dream until I realized, oh, I get to do my own thing. But it was during Funny Girl that I kind of realized, very similar to you, Mark, that I'd be out there taking bows and doing like the grand final bow. And I realized everybody on the stage likes bowing better than I do. I don't enjoy the thing you're supposed to love. I remember once I took our older daughter to see Carol Channing when she came around during one of her last tours of Hello, Dolly.
It was her 8th farewell tour. I remember it well. Yeah.
Yeah. And
eighth about 20. Yeah. All right.
As a musical theater loving mother, I felt that it was my duty to expose my children to every legend that I could. And I remember we were sitting, I think it was the Pasadena Playhouse, or maybe it was the convention center. I can't remember exactly. But we were sitting in the theater, and Carol Channing has that big Dolly reveal where she turns around in the opening number and, and gets and has her huge entrance. And I remember it was so interesting because when I first saw her and I knew the entrance was coming, she looked so tiny and emaciated and shrunken to me. And as soon as she turned around and tipped up that, her head with that big hat on, and the audience just gave her this gigantic ovation, and she opened her arms and she sucked it in and like grew 10 sizes from all of that applause and love and appreciation. And it was like, I remember thinking at the time it was kind of like a vampire. But it was also kind of miraculous that she just sucked in that energy and became what we needed her to be. And I realized I never had that. I never grew from applause in quite that way. It just wasn't my thing.
Yeah. Well, people get that way. They wake up one morning and they realize that what they're after is what their friends were all after, or what they think you're supposed to be after. And then
exactly.
they say, wait a minute, why am I doing this? I went through something very similar in my own life, where I realized I'm going after I'm thinking about this the wrong way. I'm approaching this the wrong way. I should be truer to what I want to do for me, not because this will spell success in other people's eyes.
It takes a while to figure that out, especially if you are successful at something, like you said, that other people want. You just think, I'm just ungrateful. I have to get my gratitude on. I have to learn to appreciate this. But the big aha moment for me was during our play.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Which you were very much a part of in the art and the support.
Well, Carol Lay did the artwork.
Well, but you were our liaison.
Yeah. Anyway.
You did the lettering.
That's right. I did the letter. Anyway,
you lettered it for us.
Tell these people watching about this guy named Bill that you've been hanging out with.
Oh, this guy Bill that I've been hanging out with since 1978 is my husband, writing partner.
But he wasn't when I first met you.
No, he was working at Collector's Bookstore selling 8x10s of Sly Stallone.
That's right. Yeah. but Bill was turning himself into maybe one of the best teachers of improv comedy in the business. Not only a good writer, a good director, but he was a guy who trained an awful lot of people in improv comedy, some of whom had great careers doing that kind of comedy, and some of whom took that and applied it to other kinds of acting, which is another valid thing to do with improv training. You don't have to
Right.
become an improv comedian if you learn improv. It just makes you a better actor of any kind. Almost
Makes you a
every
better actor, a better writer. I'd like to think, and I hope my children will agree, that it makes you a better parent, because you're learning to roll with things and to read the room and to listen.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
And you two segued into being a writing team more than you pursuing acting or him pursuing directing.
He wanted to be a writer. He came to California from Chicago with the intent to become a writer. And he was selling 8x10s of the cast of Dallas on Hollywood Boulevard.
Yeah.
When I met him. And we met at the Groundlings in LA before it was a theater, when it was just a group of people who had acquired a building. And that was in the late 1970s. He was teaching improv to make a buck, or to make $5. I think it cost $5 a class to take, $5 to take a 3-hour class.
Okay. And he was doing a little acting too. He was doing a little bit of acting here and there.
We would do anything we could to pay the rent. And that included going on like The Dating Game as Bachelor number 1, or these were all ways that you could or going on the Gong Show.
That's right. That's right.
A lot of people in unemployment checks, because what you would do, the way you would do it is, if your last job was an acting job, a SAG or an actor contract, then you could go and collect unemployment as an unemployed actor. So for a short period of time, and then you had to get another job. So a lot of us would write sketches to go on the Gong Show, which was ostensibly a game show, but we were hired to do it, and that way we could continue to pay the rent, beat the pavement, and try and get actual acting gigs. I was really lucky. I mean, I got a lot of commercials and did a lot of Funny Girls and made that living. But Billy was teaching improv, wanting to be a writer, and he came home one day with an idea for something that we could do in the second half of the improv workshop where I was a student, where we would always do these ongoing scenarios. We would improvise these characters and carry them forward from week to week like a soap opera. And he had an idea to do a long-term parody of Our Town, but set in LA in 1980 or whatever it was. And I said, that's a really good idea. Have you thought about writing it? And he said, no, I wouldn't know what to do. And I said, well, you just take Our Town and use it as if it's Mad Libs. And every time you come to a reference or a character or something that says Grover's Corners, New Hampshire, you find the analog. And so we did. We played Mad Libs with Our Town and wrote our place. And it was right at the time that LA was hosting the Olympics. And it was basically, we wrote our place because at the time, all of our friends were migrating to New York to go into the theater. And we were still in LA. And we were writing this piece to kind of justify our commitment to being Angelinos. It was a love letter. It was a Valentine to LA in the early 80s. And what happened was, we were doing our improv show in a coffee house called the Deja Vu in East LA that is notable because it was next to a liquor store that would often get, where there would often late on a Saturday night be an armed robbery. And so often we would find that our improv show was in lockdown, and we were thinking we couldn't get out or let our audience out because the police had surrounded the joint. Anyway, that's a side note.
Okay.
The Smitty, the man who ran the Deja Vu Coffee House, had just acquired a very tiny theater over there in East LA, and asked if we had any plays. And Billy said no, and I said yes, because we had our place. And he said, that's just a script. That's just something we wrote for fun. We don't have that. It's not a play. Smitty says, can you put it up in 2 weeks? Billy says no. I said yes. So we got all of our friends, John Stark, our next door neighbor, Xander Berkeley, directed it. We just grabbed everybody, and it was an absolute, hey kids, let's put on a show.
Yeah, I remember the show.
Yeah. It was only people we knew. It was only because Smitty had a barn, and we put on our place. And I was doubling and tripling, not only as co-author, but I played the lead in it. And I was also the press agent and publicist, even though I'd never done that before. I just took on a fake name, Lois Hauser, Lois for Lois Lane, Hauser for the street 2 streets down from where we lived in LA. And I was like, we were all like Frank Morgan in The Wizard of Oz. We were all wearing so many hats and playing so many parts. He's the gatekeeper and the horse of a different color driver and the wizard. That was me.
And as I recall, everybody was in the gay men's choir.
Everybody was in the gay men's choir.
Yeah.
So I'm on stage one day. This story actually has a point. It's very long with very many tributaries, but it has a point. I'm on stage one day with Jonathan Stark, who we still perform and play with in Instaplay. And I'm saying my lines and people laugh, and that's fun. But when John Stark, when the person I was playing opposite said a line that I had written, and that got a laugh, I realized that's a different quality of laugh to me. I like when people laugh at what I thought of, not what I did. I didn't want them laughing because I did something funny. I wanted them laughing because I thought of something funny. And that was just a full pivot for me. I realized, oh, I think that's what I'm supposed to do. And it was, I remember it so clearly. It was like one of those epiphany Oprah aha moments where I just went, I'm doing the wrong thing. I have to stop saying the words and just start putting them in other people's mouths.
Okay, that's great. Tell the people watching about Instaplay.
Well, Mark has been coming to Instaplay since the genesis of it, since he lettered the original sign for it.
That's my lettering of Instaplay on this poster, even though this is a recent one.
That's John redid it, but that's Mark's beautiful handwriting, and it is also still on the back of the bowling shirt that we wear in Instaplay.
And the drawings were by Sergio Aragones. I just grabbed him when he was over here, and he did the drawings.
Are wonderful. I know. And Instaplay was something that we made up based on the workshop to kind of invite the audience into our workshop experience, which of doing these scenarios, like I mentioned in the second half of workshop, we would do these scenarios and Billy would side coach them. And it was something that we hadn't really seen in improv. At the time, you would do sketches or short scenes or things that they call in one, where you just come out as a character and do a monologue. But scenario wasn't really happening at that time. The closest thing they had to scenario in improv was something like a herald, where you would get a theme or a topic, and everybody in the ensemble would riff on it and go in and out of different scenes that were around that theme. But we were telling a story. We were doing a narrative. And it was also an improvised musical. We worked with wonderful piano players, composers and musicians who we still work with to this day, 40 years later. Is it 40 years, Mark?
Whatever it is.
80 like to 2020, yeah.
Yeah. I must have gone to over half of the Instaplays.
How did you first come because I invited you from Pink Lady?
Yes. Yeah, we became friends, and you said we're doing this thing at the cast. I think it was at the cast.
It was at the Cast Theater.
Cast Theater, and it was usually at like 11 o'clock or 10. There would be a regular play in the theater, and then you guys would go on their set and try not to do too much damage to it, and do a completely different play on their set. And
yeah, and so the first time we ever did it, we had I think we just would take the first suggestion, somebody would shout out a suggestion, and we would just improvise it. And we got reviewed in the LA Reader and basically called out saying, this can't be true. They're not really doing it. They had a ringer in the back of the audience suggesting a title. This is not improvised. And that was in print. And it just broke our hearts and embarrassed us to pieces. And the man who actually wrote that review is highly placed in the theater right now and wrote a book about Broadway theater that I treasure. And I really want to write to him and say, I value that you said that, but you were wrong. But I haven't done that.
Oh, no.
But I do value
it. I saw at least half the Insta plays you did, I think.
You've seen dozens, if not hundreds.
Yes.
We've done hundreds of them.
Yeah. Anyway, and I was a standby for you a couple times for emergencies. You never needed me, but I had my bowling shirt. I had my blue bowling shirt. I still got it someplace.
I still got mine.
Yeah, but some of those plays were just amazing. They were just, and I can understand how somebody who didn't know would think, well, they must have written this in advance, because some of them were really, really sharp. And then there were a couple that you could tell they had no idea how to end it. You had no idea. You're just lost there.
No, I mean, that's improv. You sometimes you find it and sometimes you lose it, and you just have to keep rolling. But
I took a date. I brought a date one time to your to Instaplay, and you guys are improvising and such, and the plays take turns that you have no idea about, and all of a sudden, and it surprised the hell out of everybody on stage, the play was suddenly about anal sex. It was all of a sudden. Was it? Yeah.
Was it on a ship? Am I recalling
correctly? Yes, that's right. Yes, that's right. It was a pirate story. Yes, and and she kind of looks at me like, "What have you brought me to?"
And the code word for anal sex, the pirate word was keelhaul. We're going to keelhaul him.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. Anyway, and I remember one evening, I almost brought, I don't know if I ever told you this, I almost brought a guest who would have shocked you. I almost brought Bob Keeshan to Instaplay. We were doing CBS story breaks. We were taping, it was a Saturday.
Oh my God.
CBS story break.
My God.
And I had dinner afterwards with Bob Keeshan.
Captain Kangaroo.
That's right, Captain Kangaroo. We had dinner afterwards. He was bored out of his mind. He was staying in town. He lived in New York, and he had flown out to do these.
Did he still have that same mustache that looked like a broom?
Yes. Well, no, actually, it was much more modest. No, he didn't have the walrus type thing. It was much. Yeah. He was at this. He hosted the CBS story breaks as Bob Keeshan. We did not mention Captain Kangaroo, and we taped all the intros for one season in one day on the Price is Right set. We were on the Price is Right set. They had there's the Plinko board, and there's the big wheel, and we had this one little narrow space in between we had to keep them in
to tell stories,
to introduce do these intros for the shows. And afterwards, I said to him, "So you sticking around LA?" He says, "No, I'm gonna fly back tomorrow. I'm in a hotel room, and I'm just gonna get a sandwich someplace and read a book tonight." And I said, "You want to go to dinner?" And he said, "Really?" I go, "Yeah, let's go to dinner." So I had dinner with him. We took him to a nice restaurant that I liked. I took him to RJ's. You remember RJ's?
The rib joint, yeah.
And nobody recognized him visually, but a couple people recognized his voice. They overheard his voice. His voice was so familiar. And at the end of the evening, he was like restless. And I said, you want to do something else tonight? He said, "What do you got in mind?" I said, "Well, I've got these friends that are improvising a play. You'll be up to like 1 a.m. if you go." And he said, "Well, my flight leaves at 2. I don't know if I can do that." And we went back and forth on it. And I told him about what it was, and he said, "It sounds very interesting." He's talking about young people.
I mean,
Compared to him,
for your
you
audience
were,
who doesn't know who Captain Kangaroo is, he was like our Mr. Rogers.
yes, yeah, that's right. Uh, and and I kind of half talked him into it, and um, then he said, "Nah, I better get to bed, thank you."
Man,
So I
I
came
would
right
have
out of it. And
flipped
I just had this
out.
idea that I would just, bring him in and I'd say, "Hi, Cheri, this is my friend Bob," and you'd kind of go, "Oh yeah."
Double take.
Yeah. But no, I was bringing dates to Instaplay a lot because it was a show that I could always count on. It was something they hadn't seen, or if they had seen it, it was different every time.
It was all,
And
yeah.
and um, and I would, and my dates would always the ones who would always suggest the title that didn't get any votes.
Well, that's what I was going to say. That's what we had to move to, which has become now an Instaplay, tradition for over 40 years. And it takes like 10 minutes now of our showtime. Was we let the audience all just shout out titles and then vote on the one that they want to prove that we were not,
Prearranging anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
I never suggested titles because I thought if my title won, people would figure I was a plant because they knew that I knew you and I'd hang out with you before and after. So anyway, now you did a lot of other things.
I did a few others.
Yeah. Do you remember once you asked me if I could get you on the Richard Simmons show?
Did I?
And instead I got you on a thing called Leave It to the Women at the talk show.
I remember Leave It to the Women, and of course, Wacky Wall Walkers. You got me on, and
you were a cast member on the very first cartoon show I ever voice directed. Do you remember do you remember who you worked with in that session?
I'm not sure which one was the first one
because
you got me on a few.
On the Wall Walk, yeah. Well, on the Wacky Wall Walkers, the primetime special, the cast was Dawes Butler.
Pretty good.
Bill Scott, and I think one of his first non-J Ward voice jobs. Frank Welker, Tress MacNeille was in it. Howie Morris, Marvin Kaplan, Peter Cullen, a couple of other people of that caliber. That's
an amazing cast.
Amazing cast. Yeah, they just let me hire whoever I wanted. So
and it was it was a show about those things that you throw against the wall and then they roll down.
Yeah.
Those jelly things that weren't supposed to stain your wall, but they do.
Yeah. Well, anyway, but you were in that, and I gave you some other voice jobs here and there.
Hank the Cow Dog.
That's right. You were in that, and a few others. Yeah. Anyway, but you, so you left doing acting on camera, and you went to voiceover, and then you segued, and next thing I knew, you were writing the Jeffersons. Was that the first thing you guys sold scripts for? Was it the Jeffersons?
It was the first American thing. No, actually, we worked on Benson a little bit before that.
Oh, okay.
But prior to that, we had written some spec scripts, and I mean, we knocked around for a while, and we got a lot of rejection. And I remember every single rejection. I don't remember the good things. I don't remember the acceptances, but I can quote you every rejection.
That's not a good sign. You shouldn't do that.
It just happens.
First of all, you should always not use the word rejection. You should always use non-acceptance.
I can remember all the non-acceptances. I'm going to quote some for you right now because I'm over it.
All right.
One was, I just don't find them funny. That was when we were not accepted to write Not the 9 o'clock news. One was, they are at best okay. That one hurts. There are others. I don't have to go on.
Okay.
But God, where was I going with that? I got fully caught up in
you went from Benson, and then you went to.
I know. Yeah. We were writing spec scripts for quite some time, and a spec script that we wrote for the TV show Taxi.
I read that script. You had me read that script.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Well, a wonderful, wonderful man who worked for the Canadian Broadcasting Company named Jack Humphrey, who I will treasure and thank for the rest of my life. He read it and he said, "You're really good, and I can use this story if we adapt it for his show," which was a show called Hanging In, and it was about a teen crisis center. So we took our episode of Taxi and turned it into an episode of Hanging In, set in a teen crisis center, and began writing for Jack. And so he was the one who really gave us the confidence and the launch to be able to then go back in and try again pitching in, network TV, and finally got hired on the Jeffersons. I will add, got hired by Groundlings, and every television show we've ever had, we've either been hired by or we have hired Groundlings. So that whole fraternal, maternal, sororital thing really worked.
On a couple of shows, you hired me.
Oh yes, we did.
Yes. Anyway.
Very happily.
Yes. Anyway, so then you wound up on Cheers for a while,
yes.
And there's Cheers. Or like people aren't going to remember what that show looked like, and I think Kelsey Grammer's about 8 years old in that photo. And that show did how many years were you on that?
We came on in the 4th season, just after Woody, early in the 4th season. I was also 10 days pregnant with our first child when we started on Cheers.
Oh, okay.
Didn't know it at the time, but found out soon thereafter. Mm-hmm. So we worked on Cheers the 4th season through season 10, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 7 years.
Yeah. Which year did you accept the Emmy from Uncle Milty?
When I was like 40 weeks pregnant with Teddy, that would have been 1989 because I was 40 weeks pregnant with our second child.
There seems to be no video around of this, but I remember Milton was supposed to hand you the award and get off stage, and he kept talking and horning in on your speech and trying to make it all about him. And you were, I felt alternately sorry for you up there, but you were handling him wonderfully. And then
remember that very kindly.
Yeah, and I also remember, and it reminded me because I mentioned earlier the Jerry Lewis thing on Pink Lady. You don't remember that well, but what happened was we were doing this sketch with Jerry, and Jerry had written parts of it. He had insisted on nobody could write for him but himself, so he gave us this whole little stupid piece, and we fleshed it out, and then he wasn't following either what he'd written or what we'd written. And you were playing a makeup lady.
Powdering him, yeah.
Powdering him, and you were supposed to like powder him almost, albino on this thing. And he just suddenly in the rehearsal, in the camera rehearsal, which was about 10 minutes before we were actually rolling tape, he suddenly grabbed you and started shaking you like he was choking you, and you yelled, "Union!" and he dropped you, and it got an incredible laugh from the crew. There was no why.
Who were all union members.
Yes, all two. And he never did it again. It was a very funny bit, and he didn't do it again because you had upstaged him.
I know.
And
I thought we were all just there to make things funny, but
oh no, he was
we were there to make him funny.
He was there to be Jerry. He was there to be Jerry. I lost, certain people you don't want to work with because you see them up close and you go, oh, I don't like that person that much anymore. I lost my whatever affection I had for Jerry a little bit then, a little bit later. Other times I saw him in person and behaving. Yeah, he just. Yeah, but
he was a complicated gentleman.
Okay, now after Cheers, you guys did a show with Bob Newhart.
We did, and so did you.
That's right. Yes, and the Bob Show, which I thought was a lot of fun. I thought that was a neat show. Didn't quite make it the success that other Bob Newhart show did. I just kind of felt that the audience was not ready to fall in love with him in a third role. It was a stretch that they liked him, and they loved him as the psychologist, they kind of warmed to eventually as the innkeeper, but it was like, okay, Bob, that's it. You only get 2 from us. We're not going to love you as the comic book artist.
Yeah, we were coming right off of Cheers, and alas, although it worked out fine, we were not given. They handed us Bob as our next, or they offered us Bob, and we were just like, oh my God, yes. Anybody in comedy would have jumped at the chance, and they said, this is a slam dunk. You cannot fail with Bob. But we did. We took it on ourselves and I think for a few reasons. I think that the reason you're offering may be true, but I also think we made some tactical errors. It was a CBS show. We thought it was going to be a CBS Monday night show, which was their much more sophisticated evening. That there were other shows around it on Monday night, like Murphy Brown and Designing Women. And so we thought we were going to be playing for the one night of the week that CBS went kind of smart.
High. Yeah.
And so we were writing to the Monday night audience, but they put us on Friday night, which is kind of more the hee-haw night.
When nothing was successful on Friday night then.
No. And so that
which is the same problem we had with Pink Lady. We were on the night that the network wasn't even trying to program.
Saturday night, yeah.
We were on Friday nights.
Oh, we were on Friday. Friday's tough unless you're on ABC and it's TGI Friday in that kind of a block. I mean, we're going back now into ancient history talking about network blocks.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I think we miscalculated is we fell so deeply in love with how sharp and smart and funny and acerbic Bob could be in real life. And he hadn't played that on TV. He always played the mild-mannered kind of witness to other people's crazy comedy in both the shows that he was on. And I mean, obviously he was nobody's straight man. He was always getting the laugh, but it was as a gentle soul. And we wanted to play Bob with a bit more bite because that's how we knew him in life. And we thought that would be so much fun. And the audience just didn't buy what we were selling.
Well, it was a fun show while it lasted.
It was really fun. Tell about the episode that you came in and did for us. It was amazing.
It was fun to do. No, it was a fun episode, and I think the joke. There's this famous joke that when the Marx Brothers were on Broadway, George S. Kaufman, who was the author of the show, was backstage and he's talking to somebody. He seems distracted, and the guy he's talking to says, "What's wrong, Bob?" George, he says, "I don't know. I think I may have heard one of my actual lines."
Oh, well.
I mean, you guys took the script and you ran with it, and you made it a much better script, and that was fine.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, if your viewers haven't really talked about the process that a script goes through when a freelance script gets turned in, and then it goes through the week and all the changes that have to happen. We didn't know it when we were writing, before we were on staff, that it just goes through all of these changes for so many reasons that you can't predict.
Including the fact that the joke's been around for 4 days.
Precisely.
On every show, the first sitcom I ever did, I came up with what I thought was a funny joke, and the producer to me says, "Don't come that's a Monday joke. We taped on Tuesday. That's a Monday joke. It's Wednesday. Don't put that joke in now. Come up with that joke on Monday." Yeah, because people will just be bored with it by then, and they'll replace it with a much worse joke because it's new, it's fresh.
Yeah.
And you get that sometimes on these shows. My experience was that the shows that I worked on generally did not get progressively better during the week. They just got progressively different.
Exactly. They went sideways at best. We learned in time a phrase that I very much appreciate now, which is take out the improvements.
Yeah.
Yes. We learned to sometimes realize we've gone a step too far. We've overworked this. Let's go back to what originally made us laugh. But but sometimes that's hard because sometimes you need to convince the actors of that too. And when a joke goes, a little bit old on them, and they're not getting the same laugh of surprise from the crew or the company around, then they don't have confidence in it, and you just have to keep everything bubbling.
Yeah. Okay. So after Bob, you had Hope and Gloria, and you had and after that was, help me with the chronology here.
Okay, so Hope and Gloria was a must-see TV show, but for us it became must-flee TV. I had
you were not happy during those days, I remember.
I wasn't, but for a lot of reasons. I had 3 young children, and I realized much, much later I had come to the exact point in my children's life that my mother was. They were the same age that I was, they were around the same age that me and my brother were when our mom went to work and we never saw her again. Mm-hmm. And so there were a lot of forces at play that caused me to need to pull up stakes and move to Santa Barbara and pick up my children every day after school and drive on every field trip. And I didn't even know at the time that I was redoing my own childhood on them, or doing over. I was doing a do-over. Okay. But I was going nuts, and I couldn't do it. And we were on the Warner Brothers lot where the dark Batmans were being shot. And I used to, at lunchtime, go over to the dark Batman, dark alleys of Gotham City and just sit on the sidewalk and like in this most wretched place and go, what is my life? I want to be with, I had a baby, I had a kindergartner, and I had a 4th grader, and I wanted to be with them, and I couldn't be happy. And so we moved to Santa Barbara. And that was the life part of it. Really good. And then we get up here, we buy a beautiful house, and then it's like, and then the phone stops ringing because nobody has us on speed dial. And our 805 number has made us extinct. And, but we get it. So I have the whole house feng shuied, and I put intentions, we bring in water features, and I put intentions under it because we're going to either have to pay for this place or sell it and go back to LA and work again. And I really wanted to make a go of being the mom, the pickup mom. We get a call from Roy Price, who is working at Disney in television animation, and asks if we want to do a Saturday morning cartoon show for their ABC One Saturday morning. Well, it's a huge pay cut from anything we had made in the last decade. It's a huge step down, except if you've got a kindergartner and a 4th grader and a baby. And then it's like the most important, wonderful thing you can do because we're writing something that our children are going to be part of and enjoy. And so we wrote the TV show Teacher's Pet with Nathan Lane. And there it is. And Gary Baseman had created this, he had this idea of a little dog who, on the first day of 4th grade, when his boy goes to school, puts on clothes and a beanie hat to hide his, to hide his tail and his ears, and suddenly he's a boy. And he's a boy voiced by Nathan Lane. So we turned it into a musical because when you got Nathan Lane in the lead, you turned it into a musical. He was the dog in the family. Jerry Stiller was the bird, pretty boy, and David Ogden Stiers was the scaredy cat, Mr. Jolly.
We have a question here in the chat room from my friend Scott Shaw, who was on this show 2 days ago.
Scott Shaw.
Hi, Cheri. It's been a long time. You look great. Any Jerry Stiller stories from your hilarious Teacher's Pet? You got a Jerry Stiller story for Scott?
I'll tell you something. It was so interesting because Jerry Stiller, first of all, we had Jamie Thomason was our voice director, and he was spectacular. He had the best way of giving line readings, which is he would paraphrase the line as if he was just saying something like it, but he was embedding the line reading into it for our actors. And we had a spectacular cast, Deborah Jo Rupp and and I mean, it was just like, it went on and on. And then our guest players were always fantastic. Bernadette Peters, and we had Kelsey Grammer, B.B. Newworth, Megan Mullally. I mean, we just had a marvelous Broadway superstar cast. Back to Cheri Steinkellner. Jamie never gave him a line reading. Not once, ever. You could not. He was playing a little, just a little parakeet who had the biggest, baddest attitude. And Cheri would just scream into the mic and spit into the mic. And we loved every single thing he did and never gave him a note in all of the time we worked with him. Just adored the man.
Amazing actor. Just wonderful. Wonderful performer.
His commitment, and he was just so funny. He would find things, I mean, not exclusively, of course, David Ogden Stiers and Nathan Lane, we were an amazing company, but he and they would find things that we didn't know we had written. And God bless them, they were so much better than anything we could have thought of. Thanks, Scott.
All right, let's segue to, well, now you wrote a lot of theater stuff during all this time. You were writing musicals and plays and things like that. And then you got to Broadway with Sister Act.
Well, somebody got to Broadway with Sister Act, but our name is on it.
Yeah, well, okay.
We played the Palladium. We got to London with our script intact.
Okay.
And
the
then,
man, yeah.
What?
I was going to say that when you got a Tony nomination, the man who presented the award in that category was the man who used to use you as a prop, Robin Williams.
Oh, I did not go to the Tonys that year because it was the day our son was graduating from college.
It was the year Book of Mormon was going to win everything.
Of course.
So it didn't, I wouldn't have gone if I were you.
We didn't have a prayer, but I really was able to say, see, Teddy, see how much we love you. We're not going to the Tonys because we love you so much.
Yeah, I stopped going to the Emmys the first time. I just said, I'm not going to win. Why am I going to this thing?
Yeah, but then sometimes they throw you a curveball and you do win.
Didn't happen to me. so I'm fine with that. And here's Billy with you and Whoopi.
Karen Johnson.
Yeah, anyway.
Another old Comedy Store pal.
Yeah. So anyway, what you doing these days?
That's a great question, Evanier.
That's right.
I'm teaching online.
I guess one occasionally, yeah.
No, you've done nothing but great questions. I am teaching online, which I actually love. I've been teaching at UCSB, teaching writing and a couple other classes that you've been a marvelous guest at on my Hollywood industry class. In fact, I'm going to invite you to come do it online if you will.
Okay, sure.
But I love teaching online. I think it's a great equalizer. And I'm also really fascinated. I am one of the very, very few theater people that I know that is kind of excited to be in the very beginnings of what I think is a new form of theater. I mean, we are going to go back to theater. We are going to, Shakespeare survived the plague. We survived the Spanish flu. There will be a day when we sit elbow to elbow, shoulder to shoulder back in theaters again and all laugh and cry together and applaud. But I'm fascinated by Zoom theater. And mostly because I recognize that it is so basic right now and that we're going to very quickly look at this as being such a primitive version of the art form that it will become. And so I've been participating in a lot of theater festivals, mostly with student actors, where they commission playwrights to write for this medium, because I think this is the beginning of something and I don't know what it is.
That's kind of
But
why I'm doing these things here. I'm still I wanted to play with this form because I think it's going to turn into something interesting, and I just was fascinated by the possibilities on it. I could not have conceived of doing this with you or anyone 4 years ago or 3 years ago.
no.
Uh, and here we are doing a TV show on my computer. I mean,
And mine,
yeah.
it's so interesting. I mean, it's so limitless in terms of the people that you can bring together at the same time. The liveness, I think, is interesting. The intimacy of it is interesting. I mean, we've got a long, long, long way to go in terms of like managing sound, although you're doing really well, and stuff like that. But it's really fun to be at the beginning of something, don't you think?
Better than being at the end of it. Yeah. No, I don't know where it's going either. I think I have a little better hunch now than I did before I started doing these, but I don't. I'm far from seeing any, the next stage, what that's going to be. And I don't know how much of it is going to go away once people can go back into theaters unmasked,
Right.
whenever that happens. I'm wondering if we aren't going to see, like, the production of My Fair Lady with everybody wearing masks or something like that.
Well, I was thinking that'll be really interesting because that'll be something that you can either buy or they hand out at concessions where you've got your My Fair Lady mask, of course, your Phantom mask.
The whole audience will be the Blue Man Group. Everybody will be masked. Okay.
Right. We'll all pull it up.
That's right.
But
But
I think it's interesting. I mean, I think this is more like, television didn't knock out radio. Radio didn't knock out theater. I think this is going to be an add-on.
but it changed it. Television changed radio, and so on. And I would not be a bit surprised that even after the pandemic is over, Stephen Colbert is doing one show a week from his house.
Interesting.
And such, because somebody is going to look and say, it costs us 1/80th as much to do the show that way. And I think we're also going to see an awful lot of places where somebody is going to walk through a big office and say, why do we need a big office? Everybody worked at home during the pandemic. We can save $50,000 a month in rent on this place by cutting it down by 2/3. I think office space is suddenly going to go away, and we're going to see that be another, like we need another recession in the world. But nobody. It's interesting that nobody knows where this is going. I don't mean just what we're doing here now. The whole pandemic, the entire thing, and you don't even know at what point you are going to decide, hey, it's safe to go to Costco without a mask. Even if they say it's okay now for business to reopen, a lot of businesses are not going to reopen because they don't think the customers will be there, and the customers are not going to be there because the place hasn't reopened. And there's this whole chicken and egg thing. And at some point, you might decide it's fine to go to stores that I won't go to, or vice versa, or to do activities or to socialize in bigger groups. And we're going to be going through that for a long time.
Right.
And so anyway, but let's not talk about that. We're talking about Cheri here. We're to talk about Cheri.
But I think, it is fascinating. Okay, I'll tell you the Cheri part of this. I've had a Cassandra complex my whole life where I could, my grandma, my Nana Betty, told me that she was descended of witchy women, who could see into the future, and that it skipped a generation. So she got it, but her mom didn't, and my mom didn't, but I did. And so I've always had a little bit of an ability to at least guess right about what's next. I've also been cursed with it because nobody ever believes me. My husband, Billy now believes me, but when I'll say, I think this is going to go in this direction, most people just go, oh, Cheri, you're being too positive, or you're being too negative, or you're being something. You're being too Cheri. This is the first time that I can recall having no idea, like existing wholly in the now and going, I can't peek around the next corner, much less down the road. So it's forcing us to really be here now. I've learned how to make hummus from garbanzo beans. I've learned how to use mayonnaise to polish a table. I've learned how to Google anything I don't know that I want to do. I've learned how to be a really excellent Googler and instruction follower. And I have all kinds of new capacities. I'm going to make, I wanted to, same garbanzo beans started sprouting because I didn't make them into hummus quickly enough. So I want to plant them and grow garbanzo beans. And then I looked that up, like, how do you grow garbanzo beans? And I saw this thing where you just take all PVC and you make like a teepee shape out of it, and you grow your vines up it, and it makes like a little house that you can go sit inside, but it also is beans. So I'm exploring with things I never imagined I would explore with, and never would have taken the time or had the need. And I'm really appreciative of that. I really like it.
Good.
Also, I got a Roomba.
Yes. Yes, that's a good thing.
In fact, I'm just like, she's pretty much fully charged by now. She could just start sweeping my floor right now if I wanted her to.
Okay.
And I'm really pleased with that. So what else do you want to know, Evanier?
Well, let's go
to start my Roomba. I've got my
No, it's fine. We're going to the chat room. We have a Disney legend in the chat room. Floyd Norman, the great Disney animator person, is online saying, "Are you still in Santa Barbara? My hometown." Yes, they are in Santa Barbara in one of the nicest homes you've ever seen in your life. I have stayed there.
Is Floyd in Santa Barbara?
No, he's not. But Floyd was on Pawn Stars last week. He sold some of his drawings on Pawn Stars in one of those sham reality show things. He conspired with the phoniness of that show and did stuff like that. But we still love him. He's amazing.
Mark, maybe Fred can come in, because now maybe you all can come into my Hollywood class together. That would be so much fun.
Floyd, you want to go up to see?
No, he doesn't have to come up. He can just
dial in. That's right. Yes, that's right. I forgot. Cheri teaches a class. Tell them what that class is really about. The premise.
It's called Hollywood Anatomy of an Industry. And I get, just like Mark is doing here, I get people that I like and admire to come in and teach 200 and 250 undergrads all about what they do.
Well, I've been there a couple times. Do you remember the moment you asked me for my inspiration? One of my inspirations, I mentioned the Dick Van Dyke Show, and you asked your audience, your class, how many people had seen the Dick Van Dyke Show, and none of them had.
I know.
I looked, I looked like that Scream painting. I mean, who says what? So
it's true, Mark. But you know what? I could also ask how many of you have seen Seinfeld, and nobody would raise their hand. It's like the wheel turns real fast.
When I taught comedy writing at USC for a couple of semesters, I brought in a video of Robert Klein, and nobody in the class had ever heard of him. So, I took Amber to see Robert Klein. He was out in Thousand Oaks. He was doing an evening out there, and I took Amber out. I said, "This is one of my favorite comedians. You've never heard of him." She didn't know him, and so she was, first of all, the only black person in the audience. She was the only person in the audience under the age of 50. And
by about 30 years.
Yeah. Well, I'm in my late 60s. So anyway, and then the math still works. And then, and she loved him, except she kept turning to me saying, "What's Watergate? What's a Catskills resort?" Because he did have some stuff like that. Trevor Kimball has a kid starting at UCSB. Maybe Trevor, maybe your kid will want to be in the class.
Trevor Kimball, if we're still in quarantine, and the class that I'm talking about, the Hollywood industry class, is called 54, that's the number, Hollywood Anatomy of an Industry. And I would love to welcome your kid because I'm going to take special good care online of the freshmen. I am so feeling for the kids who are their last quarter of senior year and their first quarter of freshman year might be online, that we're going to make my goal and my intention is to give them a class that they'll go, gee, it's a good thing we couldn't be on campus because we couldn't have done this class there. It's going to be really special. And it's going to have a big writing tilt. So whether or not they are a writer, I'm going to really spend a lot of time working on talking to your own voice. And I think it's going to be really, really fun. So I would love to welcome them. And if they do come in, please let them know that we talked.
Okay. Mark Martirosian says, my kids loves teacher's pet. Really hit a chord in this house. There you go.
Thank you, Mark. It's on Disney Plus now.
Okay. Joe Music says, I thought that the Bob used on the Big Bang was the Bob you created. Thanks.
Well, it was the Bob that, thank you. It was the Bob created. We just said, hey, let's unleash that guy. He's fun.
Yeah. And Trevor Kimball says again, Instaplay is the best deal in town. And my pal Phil Geiger says, Instaplay is wonderful. I told him about it. He's come to a couple of them. And,
thank you.
And let's see, I got more comments here. And Floyd says he's lectured at UC Santa Barbara. But he also says, you bet, meaning yes, he'll participate.
Wonderful.
So,
thank you.
Okay.
I'm writing it down.
All right, good.
I'm writing it down in Sharpie. So
that makes it legally binding if it's in Sharpie. So
okay.
So Cheri, I have enjoyed talking to you. We're not yet finished here yet, but I've enjoyed talking to you. I've always enjoyed talking to you. This is a neat thing to talk to people I like, and
I love that you're doing this.
Well, it's kind of fun because I remember lots of stuff. I remember things, and it's like I've reminded you of some things you've forgotten or you buried in your past and things like that. And
my hard drive is much smaller than your hard drive. I do not have the capacity.
Well, you just remember. Oh, wait a minute. Here's another question here. Trevor Kimball wants to know, I'd like to ask about the last episode of Bob. Do you have any memories of how Peter Bonners ended up having a cameo as Jerry Dedez from the Bob Newhart Show? Was it just because he knew Bob or question mark?
It was just, but Peter was directing episodes for us too. Our whole goal on that show was to make Bob happy. It was so much fun for us to just delight and tickle him. And so if you remember the show, Trevor, he had a poker group, and the poker group was like Steve Lawrence and Dick Martin and just Peter. Was Peter on it? I think it was just all his buddies. And all we wanted to do was
Didn't Dick Martin direct a couple of those shows?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But I need you to remember that for me, Mark, because the hard drive.
Oh, well, no, I remember a couple of, when I was on the set with you and Bob, there were a couple of people who had been on earlier Bob Newhart shows who were just dropping by, hint, hint. like, I'm available. You could put me on this one.
If it would make Bob happy, we would. Or if it would give somebody their medical insurance, we would. We did that a lot.
Bob.
Like a lot of people. If you think we were casting the best person, we were casting the person whose insurance was running out.
I did that myself. Yes, I did that myself a number of times. But the thing is, like, Mr. Newhart is one of the few people of comedy legends, and the word legend is so overused in this business, it is meaningless these days. But there was a time when we looked around, we had Jack Benny and George Burns and Milton Berle and all those guys, and they all kind of disappeared within a short period of time. And now the comedy legend people are Carl Reiner, Mel Brooks, Dick Van Dyke, Carol Burnett, and Bob Newhart. And he might have made the list, but Bill Cosby is in a different category now. I mean, there's just not those guys anymore. There's not that wonderful. We're going to wake up one of these mornings, and the elder statesman of comedy will be a Wayans brother. I mean, it's just it's like that. But Bob was so funny and so nice, and he was absolutely amazing to just be around him. Those few times I was around him, you must have just loved that job tremendously.
Pressured. It was one of the best jobs, and it was such a happy experience. 6 days a week, and on the 7th day, the overnights came in.
Well,
and people just weren't watching.
Well, you have times in this business. There are times when you have successes that don't help you and failures that don't hurt you, and you have successes that do help you and fail. You just don't, and it all averages out about right. But individual things, I've done projects. And I go, boy, I really like this. Why didn't anybody else? And then sometimes you do something and it's a huge hit and you go, that's the one they like. And I think that's one of the things that in a way is colorful about show business. It's like, William Goldman says, nobody knows anything. You just have these things that
quote, and it never goes old.
You have these shows that can't miss and they do, and you have these things that can't possibly succeed and they do, and it's what's interesting about it.
Where did we go right?
Well, I kind of like watching televised car chases, those car chases on TV, because it's one of the few times on television when nobody has a clue what's going to happen. The producers are sitting there. They don't know if they once they decide to cut to the live car chase in the middle of the news, they don't know if they're committing to 2 minutes or 2 hours. And they don't know if the ending is going to be so uninteresting that people will feel cheated that that the car just pulled over and the guy surrendered or something like that, or they lost the car.
But don't you think a presser in the Rose Garden is kind of like that too?
No, because he's going to say something stupid. You may not know what.
But you don't know what.
But it almost doesn't matter anymore. There's going to be one incredible, ghastly quote to take away from it. And you're going to go, why don't his supporters see what this man just said? If Barack Obama had said something 1/10 as stupid as that, they would never forget it. They would seize on it. And that's going to happen. All right. It's like the end of a Three Stooges comedy. You don't know how they're going to destroy everything, but they will. It's going to, so I just there is something. I mean, we obviously hate this whole pandemic. We hate the people who are suffering. We hate that people are dying. We hate that people are losing their life savings. We hate all this awful stuff is going on. But you can look and find these little smidgens of interesting things, and it is kind of interesting to live at a time when nobody knows what's going to happen. I don't like it, but it's interesting.
It's not comfortable.
It's not comfortable. It's not absolutely comfortable. I have no idea how long it's going to be before I can hug you again. But it's I just have no idea of that. And it's interesting, and that doesn't mean it's good. But there is something to be said for the challenge we get of having to live this way and then adapt to it. And we all have those little moments. It's like we had the Northridge earthquake, terrible thing, but all of us had at one moment we did something really clever or really heroic or really like, oh boy, look how I stop this bad thing from happening or whatever. There's something to be said for it. You should recognize it, and we're coping with it, and we're living through this, and and most of us will be fine on the other end of this. Most of us will be fine. We'll get through it. We'll get through. I just saw now they're predicting a huge hurricane season this year, and I thought, boy, that's what some parts of this country need, is more something else to worry about, something else to cause problems. That won't bother us here in California.
No, but yesterday was the first day of fire season.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So
nature is a mighty, mighty thing.
yes, yeah. Well, it's you know, there's times when I say I don't want to live in interesting times. I know, thank you, but I do recognize that there is something fascinating about it that you could test your abilities and such.
Yeah.
Anyway, Cheri, this has
Mark,
been delightful talking to you. I love talking to you.
I love talking to you.
You know, if you want, we can do this without people watching. I can set up
Okay.
this little split screen thing next time. We had lunch, was it 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, we
with
had one of the
our
early COVID
FaceTime.
lunches.
We had FaceTime lunches. We had FaceTime lunch. You're on my iPad. I'm on your whatever you were watching me on, and and that was fun too. I am making contact with people I haven't talked to enough in this
Yeah.
isolation. That's
And
one
we
of the
can have
ways.
lunch. We've learned we can have lunch in different cities or different states or different countries even.
That's right.
Well,
Yes.
we can't have lunch in different countries, but we'll have a meal.
We'll have a meal. You and I will pick out. Let's pick out a cuisine. Like let's say that on a certain day we're
Yeah,
both
we
going to
can
have
do a
it.
theme.
We'll have Italian food, or we'll have Chinese food, and you
Or
get your
matzo
Chinese
balls
food,
or
and I'll get
whatever.
my whatever it is. Yeah, Nate Now's Delicatessen is open again. We could, you
Oh,
know, they opened it up again.
okay.
Yes.
Well, I don't have it. You know,
Is there-
Floyd will
is there-
tell you we don't have a Jewish deli in Santa Barbara.
How many Jews are there in Santa Barbara? About 11, something like that.
No, there are a few.
Is there a minion?
We're here.
Is there at least a minion in Santa
We've
Barbara?
got a minion.
Okay, all right.
We started
Good.
the minion in our garage. We
All
have
right.
a stool.
Well, Cheri, I thank you very much here. Thank you, all of you in the chat room. This show will repeat ad infinitum in this space on YouTube. If you have not subscribed to my channel, please do so. It doesn't cost anything. And when I get over 1,000 subscribers, I get certain perks and powers from YouTube. I want to
How
see
many
what
do you
that's
have, Mark?
all about. I haven't looked for a couple. I haven't looked today. I asked on my blog if I was like 40 short, and I asked on my blog. Maybe I'm over now. And I haven't looked yet. I'll look when we get off here.
Mark,
But,
I'm going to do it right now. I'm subscribing.
oh, that's good of you. See what we love you, Cheri. There you
know
are.
what, Mark? You're so close to being an influencer.
I'm at hold on. Holly Buchanan says I'm at 997 right now. Okay.
Oh my God! I
Okay,
can be with
okay,
1,000.
okay,
I just have to let you know.
okay. Somebody else come in there. Somebody tell me when we hit 1,000. We're gonna keep this is our telethon going. We're gonna keep this going, this talk going until I break 1,000. What are we at? What are we at the moment? Somebody, I can't see it on my screen at the moment here. What are we at?
I've gone over to it, Mark.
Okay, what are we at?
Wait, Mark, what's the name of it?
It's News from Me TV. Okay. Yeah.
Mark, is it time? You've got 998. Should I subscribe and let somebody else see the 1,000?
No. Well, no. Okay. Now Trevor Kimball says I'm at 998. Chad Ridden says I'm at 997. Okay, he's behind there, showing 998 now. Okay, who do I hear 999? We have an auction going here. Is there anybody here who hasn't subscribed yet? Anybody?
Mark, I'll be 999 and let somebody else do the 1,000. I'm willing to do that
nice.
for you.
That's nice. Yell to Billy. See if he's at his computer.
Oh shoot! Now I've got to sign in to YouTube. You know what, Mark? I'm going to go over and do it on my on my other Safari. So stay with me, everybody.
Actually, you know, I just realized I have several YouTube accounts. I could probably do it myself. I'm at 999. Gary Kundell says I'm at 999. So Cheri, have you done it yet? Are you subscribed yet? I'm
so close, Mark. I'm so close.
Okay, he's at 999.
And I'm subscribed. I did it, Mark. I did it.
Okay. Are we at 1,000? Somebody?
I have to refresh. Mark, you've got 1K subscribers.
Okay, there you go. Thank you. I don't need any of you anymore. Cheri, thank you very much. Thank you all in the chat room. Next Tuesday at this space, I will be interviewing my friend Steve Stollier, who is a very fine comedy writer and a very fine voice actor. But the thing we'll be talking about is that for the last couple of years of Groucho Marx's life, Steve was Groucho's personal secretary and assistant, and he lived in the house, or not lived out. He worked in the house with Aaron Fleming, the infamous Aaron Fleming, who I saw in action a few times. And Floyd Norman sums it up. He says, "You are wonderful, Cheri." And
Right.
so anyway, Floyd Norman, yes, that's right. You know, I don't seem to want to end this. We're going to end this now. Thank you all.
Yeah, let's quit while we're at 1,000.
That's right. That's good. You watch. Everybody's going to unsubscribe after this, but I don't think it matters. Good night, Cheri. Good night,
Muzzle
chat
tough, Mark.
people. We'll see you very soon. Thank you.
Bye, all.